Have you ever thought about the famous saying, "Nothing is certain except death and taxes"? It's a phrase that rolls off the tongue so easily, but it's worth considering that there's more to the story than just that. In fact, if we dive into the pages of the Bible, we find that there are individuals who never experienced death at all. Yes, you heard that right. 3 men, to be exact, who walked this earth and, for reasons known only to God, were taken up to heaven without tasting death. Today, let's explore their fascinating stories, starting with Enoch. Enoch is the first man in the Bible who is said to have never died. He was a descendant of Adam, but not from Cain or Abel. Rather, he came from Adam and Eve's third son, Seth. Enoch is also notable for being Noah's great-grandfather, which connects him to a pivotal moment in biblical history, the Great Flood. Now, during Enoch's time, people lived extraordinarily long lives, often exceeding a century. However, Enoch defied expectations, becoming a father at the age of 65 and living for 3 out of 5 years. It's interesting to note that this was before God set a life limit of 120 years, as mentioned in Genesis 6:3. But what set Enoch apart from his contemporaries? In a world where most people wandered down the crooked path of sin, Enoch stood out. He walked faithfully with God, developing a profound relationship with Him. Genesis 5:22 and 24 tell us that Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, for God took him. This phrase, "God took him," is a powerful testament to Enoch's close bond with the divine. It indicates that God chose to bring Enoch to heaven without him experiencing physical death. The book of Hebrews reinforces this extraordinary fact. In Hebrews 11:5-6, we read, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away." The notion that Enoch did not die as we typically understand death is significant. He was commended as someone who pleased God, and without faith, it is impossible to please Him. This relationship of faith is at the core of Enoch's legacy. What's even more intriguing is that Enoch was blessed with the gift of prophecy. In the book of Jude, we see Enoch prophesying the coming of Jesus Christ. Jude 1:14-15 states, "See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of His holy ones to judge everyone." Enoch's life exemplifies faith, obedience, and righteousness, which ultimately led to God choosing to take him from this earthly realm. Now let's move on to the second man who never died, Elijah. Elijah is perhaps one of the most well-known figures in the Bible who didn't experience death. He was a prophet during the reign of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel in Israel, a time when the people had turned to idol worship. Elijah was bold in his mission, calling out the false gods that the Israelites had begun to worship. He performed incredible miracles, including bringing fire down from heaven, to demonstrate that the God of Israel was the true God. During a time of spiritual decline, Elijah stood firm against King Ahab's impiety, urging him to repent and return to the worship of the one true God. However, Ahab remained obstinate, leading Elijah to prophesy a severe drought as punishment, with no rain or dew falling upon the land for 3.5 years. The story of Elijah's departure is just as dramatic as his life. In 2 Kings 2, we learn that Elisha, Elijah's assistant, was forewarned about his master's departure. They traveled together to the banks of the Jordan River, accompanied by 50 young prophets who stood at a distance observing. Elijah took his cloak, struck the water, and the river parted, allowing them to cross on dry ground. After they crossed, a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared, separating the 2 men, and Elijah ascended to heaven in a whirlwind. Just imagine that moment. One moment he's walking and talking with Elisha, and the next, he's taken up to heaven in a blaze of glory. It's a powerful image that underscores the divine approval of Elijah's life and ministry. Even today, Elijah's legacy lives on, inspiring countless individuals to stand firm in their faith, even in the face of adversity. Now we come to the third individual who never saw death, and this character is shrouded in mystery. His name is often less discussed compared to Enoch and Elijah, but his story is equally compelling. This figure is often identified as the prophet who was taken up by God, but the Bible doesn't provide a name as clear as the other two. This ambiguity adds to the intrigue surrounding his life and the lessons we can draw from it. So, what can we learn from these three men? Their stories remind us that faithfulness to God can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Enoch walked so closely with God that he was taken directly to heaven, bypassing death. Elijah's fearless stand against idolatry and his miraculous ascension serve as a powerful reminder of God's sovereignty and the reward of a life lived in obedience. And though the third figure may remain a mystery, he contributes to the narrative of faith and divine intervention in human lives. In a world where death feels like the ultimate certainty, the stories of Enoch, Elijah, and the unnamed prophet challenge us to think differently. They remind us that while our time on earth is finite, our relationship with God can transcend even the finality of death. Their lives encourage us to walk faithfully, to seek God earnestly, and to trust in His plan, no matter how mysterious it may seem. As we reflect on these men who never died, let's consider our own lives. Are we walking faithfully with God? Are we willing to stand up for our beliefs, even when it's unpopular? The legacy of Enoch, Elijah, and the unnamed prophet calls us to live boldly, to embrace our faith, and to trust that God has a plan for each of us that goes beyond this earthly existence. So the next time you hear the phrase, "It says, Muhammad Shambai," nothing is certain except death and taxes, remember that there's more to the story. There are extraordinary examples of individuals who experienced something beyond death, and their lives serve as a beacon of hope and inspiration for us all. Let's strive to walk in their footsteps, seeking a relationship with God that transcends the ordinary and leads to the extraordinary. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast expanse where the air is thick with the weight of destiny, and the horizon shimmers with the promise of the divine. You find yourself alongside a figure cloaked in mystery and power, Elijah, the prophet whose very name reverberates through the ages. The sun hangs low, casting golden rays that dance upon the waters, a metaphor for the separation between the earthly and the heavenly, the mundane and the miraculous. As you walk beside him, a question hangs in the air, heavy with significance. What is it that you desire before I am taken from you? Elisha, the devoted disciple, stands resolute, his heart racing with the enormity of the moment. What a question to be asked. In this fleeting instant, he feels the weight of his purpose and the legacy he wishes to inherit. With a voice steady yet filled with fervor, he expresses his wish for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. It's a bold request, one that acknowledges not only the power of his master, but also the daunting path that lies ahead. Elijah, wise and seasoned, responds with a mixture of assurance and caution. He tells Elisha that while this is no small thing, it will be granted if he witnesses the miraculous ascent of his master into heaven. As they converse, the atmosphere shifts dramatically, as if the very fabric of reality is being torn apart. Suddenly, a chariot of fire, pulled by fiery horses, bursts onto the scene, a spectacle that defies earthly explanation. The ground trembles beneath their feet as Elijah is lifted into the heavens in a whirlwind, leaving Elisha in a state of awe and longing. In that moment, the world stands still, and the connection between the earthly and divine is laid bare. Elisha, now alone, is left not only with the memory of his master's ascent, but also with the promise of the double portion he so fervently sought. But let's pause for a moment and ponder the implications of this event. Elijah's ascension is not merely a miraculous departure. It is a transition that signifies the continuation of God's work on earth. Elisha, standing on the threshold of this new chapter, embodies the hope and expectation that comes with carrying on a legacy. The divine spirit that Elijah possessed is now intertwined with Elisha's destiny, a reminder that the work of God is never confined to a single individual, but is a continuous flowing river of purpose and power. Now, shifting our focus, let's delve into another enigma that has captivated the hearts and minds of many, the figure of Melchizedek. Who is this mysterious priest-king that appears seemingly out of nowhere in the biblical narrative? To understand Melchizedek is to unravel one of the greatest mysteries of the Bible, a mystery that has intrigued theologians and scholars for centuries. In the book of Genesis, we encounter Melchizedek after a fierce battle where Abraham, armed with courage and determination, rescues his nephew Lot from captivity. Upon Abraham's victorious return, Melchizedek emerges, bringing forth bread and wine, symbols of sustenance and communion. He blesses Abraham, declaring him blessed by God Most High, the Creator of heaven and earth. Here we see a figure who is not just a priest but also a king, king of Salem, which means peace. And in his very name, Melchizedek, we find the meaning of righteousness. It's fascinating to consider the implications of this character. Melchizedek stands as a bridge between the Old and New Testaments, a foreshadowing of the ultimate high priest, Jesus Christ. In the book of Hebrews, the author draws a parallel between Jesus and Melchizedek, suggesting that Christ holds a priestly position in the order of Melchizedek, a priesthood that transcends the Levitical system established under the law. This connection invites us to reflect on the nature of priesthood, sacrifice, and the eternal covenant that God has established with humanity. What makes Melchizedek so enigmatic is the absence of a genealogy. He appears without a father or mother, without a beginning or an end, a priest forever. This lack of recorded lineage invites speculation and wonder. Who was he really? Some scholars propose that he was a pre-incarnate manifestation of Christ, while others suggest he was a historical figure whose significance was divinely orchestrated. Regardless of the interpretation, Melchizedek serves as a reminder that God's plans often transcend human understanding, and that his presence can manifest in unexpected ways. As we explore the stories of these remarkable figures, Elijah, Elisha, and Melchizedek, we begin to see a tapestry woven with threads of faith, legacy, and divine purpose. Each character invites us to reflect on our own lives and the legacies we wish to leave behind. What does it mean to ask for a double portion of something? What does it mean to be a priest in our own right, serving as intermediaries between the divine and the world around us? In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, these narratives remind us of the enduring nature of God's promises. They challenge us to consider our own desires and aspirations, to seek not just for ourselves, but for the generations that will follow. Just as Elisha witnessed the ascent of Elijah, we too are called to witness the movements of God in our lives, and to carry forth the mantle of faith into a world that desperately needs it. So, as we reflect on these stories, let's remember that the journey of faith is not a solitary one. We are part of a larger narrative, a divine story that continues to unfold with each passing day. And in that story we find our purpose, our calling, and the hope that transcends even the greatest mysteries of life. Whether we stand by the divided waters or encounter a king of righteousness, may we always seek to witness the divine in our midst and carry forth the legacy of faith with courage and conviction. In the vast tapestry of biblical narratives, there exists a fascinating thread that weaves together the concepts of peace, righteousness, and the enigmatic figure of Melchizedek. It's a thread that raises profound questions about the nature of divinity, humanity, and the intersections between them. When we delve into the meanings behind names, we find that the name Melchizedek itself means King of Righteousness, and intriguingly, he is also referred to as the King of Salem, which means peace. This duality is striking, especially when we consider that Jesus is often called the Prince of Peace. It leads us to ponder, how can a mere human be both the King of righteousness and peace? Let's take a moment to reflect on Romans chapter 3, 10-17, which tells us that there is none righteous, no, not one. The way of peace, it states, they have not known. This raises an essential question. If all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, how can a human being claim the title of king in these realms? The implications are profound. If no human is righteous, then the title of King of Righteousness must transcend human limitations. Now let's turn our attention to the figure of Melchizedek. He appears in Genesis 14, where he meets Abraham and offers him bread and wine. But what's particularly intriguing about Melchizedek is his mysterious lineage, or rather, the lack of it. The Bible describes him as being without father, without mother, without descent. The Phillips translation even emphasizes that he had no family tree. This suggests that Melchizedek was not born as human beings are. But does this imply that he was not human at all? It's a tantalizing thought. Some might argue that this absence of genealogical records doesn't mean Melchizedek had no birth. It simply means those records were lost. After all, in the context of the Old Testament, without such records, human priests could not serve, as depicted in Ezra 2:62. However, the scripture also reveals that Melchizedek is a priest forever, which adds another layer to his enigmatic nature. In the New Testament, we learn that God took an oath that Christ would always be a priest, and that his priesthood is in the order of Melchizedek. This raises the question, could Melchizedek and Jesus be the same person? Now, before we dive deeper into this conundrum, let's clarify a few things. In the New Testament, Jesus does have a father and mother. He experiences life, death, and resurrection. So how can Melchizedek, who seems to transcend human limitations, be identified with Jesus? This is where the debate gets tricky. Some scholars argue that the author of Hebrews was speaking figuratively, suggesting that Melchizedek resembles Jesus rather than being him. They point out that in virtually all other encounters with God in the Bible, the individuals involved have a clear awareness of their divine encounter. Yet in the story of Melchizedek, there is no explicit moment where Abraham acknowledges that he has been in the presence of God. It's true that Melchizedek appears almost abruptly, with no clear introduction or context. But could it be that this very ambiguity serves a purpose? Perhaps it emphasizes the transcendent nature of his character and role as a priest. Earlier in Hebrews 5:1, the author states that every priest is chosen from among men. The whole point of the priesthood is that a chosen and anointed human stands before God as our representative. Jesus, being fully man and fully God, serves as our perfect high priest. But before Jesus, the ultimate priest, the Bible clearly teaches that priests were humans who served in a representative role. So what are we to make of these differences of opinion? Should they distract us or divide us? At the end of the day, what truly matters is that we have a great high priest named Jesus, who has paid for our sins, who pleads our case before God, and who loves us with an everlasting love. This is the essence of our faith, the assurance that we are not alone in our struggles, that there is someone who intercedes for us, who understands our human condition. As we navigate through these complex theological concepts, it's important to remember that the core message of peace and righteousness is not solely about understanding the intricacies of Melchizedek's identity. It's about recognizing the profound implications of what it means to have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. In a world that often feels chaotic and divided, the message of peace is more relevant than ever. We live in a time where the quest for peace seems elusive. Yet, the biblical narrative reminds us that true peace is not found in human efforts or achievements, but in the divine presence of Christ. Just as Melchizedek brought blessings to Abraham, we too are called to be vessels of peace in a world that desperately needs it. So, as we ponder these deep theological truths and the mysterious figure of Melchizedek, let's also focus on the practical implications for our lives. How can we embody peace in our daily interactions? How can we extend grace and love to those around us? These are the questions that should guide our hearts and minds as we seek to live out our faith authentically. In conclusion, the narrative of Melchizedek and the identity of Jesus as our high priest invites us to explore the depths of our faith. It challenges us to think critically about the nature of righteousness and peace, and to embrace the mystery of God's work in our lives. Ultimately, it is a call to recognize the incredible gift we have in Jesus. A gift that offers us peace that surpasses all understanding, a righteousness that is not our own, and a relationship with the divine that transforms us from the inside out. So, let's engage with these ideas, share our thoughts, and continue to seek understanding in community. After all, it is through dialogue and reflection that we grow in our faith and deepen our understanding of the God who loves us. Thank you for joining me on this journey of exploration and discovery. Let's keep the conversation going, and may we all strive to be ambassadors of peace in our world today.